here we are. Okay, I'm here with Steve Bender. And tell me a little bit about what you do, Steve, and then I'll kind of give our listeners kind of an intro to how we know each other, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so past few years I've been a IT manager at a local insurance company. Have a team that does some ETL work, moves data around, and then another part of the team does .NET development, do a lot of reporting off of that data that we pull in, and
Nice.
yeah.
And you kind of came out of that world. You were a developer when I met you. If I recall, you weren't managing people, leading people.
Right, yeah. I'd been a manager at a previous job, and I was kind of burned out on that, quite honestly. And I said, I'm just going to go back and be a developer and live the good life.
I was just talking to somebody who reports to me yesterday about that. He kind of has an appetite to be a leader, and I said, it's funny because all the tech people that I know really want to get out of management leadership. They miss building stuff, right? So,
yeah, it's so much fun just to build something and satisfaction of seeing it. But I came in as a developer and did that for a few years, and then I just couldn't. It was just something that kind of naturally happened. I kind of became a tech lead again, and then did tech lead for a while. Then all of a sudden I was a team lead, and the place that I work really kind of spent a lot of time, and they invested a lot of time helping us learn how to really be leaders and not just managers that tell someone what to do. So that was kind of a breath of fresh air.
How many people are you responsible for leading? How big is your team now?
So,
is it the biggest team you've ever led?
No, it's not. I think I have 8 direct reports, but the team is more like 12 to 15 because we do have some matrix teams that come in.
Makes sense.
And like our testing team doesn't report directly to me, but they are part of the team. So same with the system analysts and that sort of thing. But
So how do you if you've gone back and forth between being a builder and a developer, right? Where you're actually, building the product to leading teams and managing people. There's things to love and things to hate about both. What's your overall and you've gone back and forth, so some of it's probably more fresh than it is for somebody who just kind of went the management route young and stayed in that, and they forgot how to write code or whatever. What's your take on the quality of life and your joy in the work, and how do you compare? How do your experiences in each compare with regard to how much you enjoy work?
Well, that is a loaded question.
It's big, yeah. I told you I'm going to get you talking, right?
So I think that being on both sides really gives some really great insights in helping me be a leader, because I understand what it's like to have a bunch of code that doesn't work and spend long days, even nights, trying to figure out how to make it work. And I've seen different managers say, oh, you got to have it done tomorrow no matter what, and it's like sometimes that's just not possible. And if you don't understand what it's like to be in that situation, it's
how do you make the right decision as a leader if you haven't been in that? Do you think every tech leader needs to be experienced technologist?
No, I don't think so. There are some, I work with some really fantastic leaders that are, quite frankly, a lot better than I am, that don't have development experience. But I think that everybody has their special talents and things that they can contribute to the company. And
how long have you been in the software world?
Oh my gosh, a long time. I almost hate to admit how long it's been.
I know you're a well-traveled, handy, active person, so you probably look a lot younger than you are. If you don't want to betray your age, you don't need to confess.
No, it was. Let's just say it was over 20 years ago.
Yeah, Fortran, COBOL,
No,
I
it's
didn't
kind
know
of
that far
funny
went
though.
back.
I actually my what I came out of college to do was biomedical engineering.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so I was working in a hospital, um, supposed to be, working on medical equipment.
Okay.
I was actually a cyclotron engineer,
What's
and
that?
it's a cyclotron in a hospital that makes short-lived radioisotopes that are used for metabolic imaging. And I
Oh,
don't know if
wow.
you've heard of positron emission tomography or PET.
Uh-uh.
Well, it's a metabolic imaging modality that they use it for a lot of oncology. You can radio label glucose and find out where it's being consumed in the body. Like a tumor would be, you know, eating a lot of glucose, so you can see hot spots, or you can look
Okay.
at your heart, look at how good the muscle is, how well the different parts of the muscle are metabolizing
Yeah.
glucose, different things like that. But anyway, this machine makes short-lived radionuclides,
Okay.
and it's very complex. It has magnetism, hydraulics, high vacuum, high voltage, all these things moving together to make it work. um, I saw some needs within the department that I was
Mhm.
working, and found places that needed to be automated. And I said, I took some programming classes in college.
Really?
I could probably, build some of this stuff. So I talked to my manager and said, what about automating this process?
Mhm.
And it's really embarrassing to admit, but I automated this thing in Access.
Okay.
With
There's nothing embarrassing about it. That's the tool that you had, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I had.
And did it improve the function of the department, right?
Oh yeah.
There you go. It's amazing.
So we were
And you were
tracking.
probably cheap as hell back then, right? Like
Oh yeah,
that was a free investment for that hospital,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. So we actually built um, a database of um, all of the radiopharmaceutical doses that they would draw up in the morning, and it would decay those doses throughout the day, because all the different isotopes decay at a different rate.
Mm.
So, they pull, you know, 20 20 doses of different types of radionuclides, and they could all start out at 3 millicuries, and some would be down to one by noon, and some would still be, a two or three. So
Is a myth? Sorry, this is a
it's just
complete.
an amount of radiation that's being emitted from.
Is a millicurie named after? Is it
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Is it really?
yeah,
Okay. I don't know that I've ever heard of a millicurie until that moment. So
it's
I don't
just
know.
a measurement of
Yeah.
how much activity is in.
And that's really interesting work. It's crazy that, you know, punching some code and moving some data around compelled you away from something that
Well,
interesting, right?
so what? Oh, yeah, it was probably one of the best jobs I've ever had, because it
Yeah.
was. I mean, I worked with a bunch of researchers, really super smart people,
Mhm.
and it just was very cool, some of the stuff that we were doing. Um, but yeah, I built this thing, and what's funny is we had some remote sites, and they said, "Oh, we want to use this thing in these remote locations too, because it's so valuable." And I said, "Okay, well, let's install it in these remote sites." And back then, our network speeds were quite slow,
Yeah.
and set it up, hit run, and it was just slow as molasses.
But your product got picked up and distributed to the to.
Well, no, actually, we had to go back to the drawing board. So I learned a lot doing this project.
Yeah.
I learned that I needed a relational database.
Okay.
So
But that's what exposed you to the broader world of
right,
software
right.
and
So I actually
everything.
got the department to buy me Oracle,
Really?
and set up an Oracle database, moved everything from Access over to Oracle, got Visual Basic, and reconstructed all of the Access screens in Visual Basic, and had the client server thing going,
Yeah.
and then it was nice and fast again. And learned a lot doing that.
And it's
Um,
we when I was a kid in school, I used to peg leg my pants or whatever. You roll them up tight or whatever. That was the fad, right? I think my sister wore jelly shoes, like
jelly
jelly
shoes.
shoes. They were like little rubber, slip on shoes before plastic before Crocs existed, right?
Okay.
My point is, yeah, there's always something you can look back on and kind of laugh at, but like that was really cool, right? And that doesn't mean it may not be cool to us now, but it's still cool that that's what you were doing at the time, and that's how you got your entry, right? Access, and your company got you an Oracle database, and the next thing you know, you're solving software related
Exactly.
problems
And
with
yeah,
software.
I was a software developer all of a sudden
Yeah.
instead of a biomedical.
Yeah. Do you ever regret giving up the biomedical engineering path?
Sometimes just because it was so interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm.
Yeah, we all seem. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things, though, right? Like we take interest in sometimes in the things that we're not as close to.
Right,
So
right.
it's easy to look back on that and think, "Oh,
It's
I
fun
wanted
to
to go
talk
deeper."
about it now. Yeah.
Right. That's right. So you got into software via a quick little access database or whatever to solve an automation problem in this hospital.
Yep.
Fast forward, the insurance company you're working for is a health insurer, so you're kind of in the healthcare space again.
Right.
Is any of that kind of like background in biomedical engineering ever clue you into some jargon or business issues
Oh
that you
yeah,
run
of
into?
course. Because I was working with this database also had all the patients that were coming in every day for their treatments.
Mm.
So we were matching up, different doses with the patients in the database, printing out labels, doing
Okay.
all stuff like that. And, you know, back then I'd learned all about the CPT codes and all of that good stuff. And there's a lot of hospital jargon that, we had Epic and,
Mm.
different systems like that.
It's kind of relevant again, all over again.
It
Huh?
is, yeah. Yeah.
Have you spent any time in the software world outside of the healthcare
Yes.
vertical? Yeah.
So when I was doing all this work in nuclear medicine, um, a, a friend of mine kind of came to me and said, I've got this other friend who's working on a startup, and he's looking for someone just like you. Would you be open to talking with him about maybe helping out a little bit? I said,
Mm.
oh, sure, why not?
He sounds like a good recruiter.
Yeah, he was actually a consultant,
Yeah.
and yeah, but yeah, so we talked a few times, and I think I even helped him with a couple things on the side just in the evenings to get him going. And he kind of came to me one day and said, I just landed this contract and I got to fill some spaces,
Mm.
and you'd be perfect for one of them. And this contract's guaranteed for 2 years. And
Mm.
I could tell he was a good salesman just by talking to him. So I felt pretty comfortable. And, looking back at it now, it's like so many startups fail. It was probably
You're lucky you
very
survived.
dangerous. But yeah, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I was quite young at the time. So
Are they still around, or did they sell,
they
or
were, they were around for, um, I worked for them for probably 16 years at least.
Mm.
Um, and everything ramps up, plateaus, and then
Yeah,
falls
16
off.
years ago startup, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so what happened, I remember when you and I worked together, that shop felt like a startup,
yes.
and it was, and a little software services company
Mhm.
that was 9 years old when I found it, and then you joined us shortly thereafter, if I recall.
Yeah,
Um, but it still felt, we're operating in this little hallway, and there's just a dozen people.
yeah.
I don't even know if there was a dozen people when I started, maybe about that,
I
and
can't remember, but yeah,
somewhere around there.
it was small.
And then we moved into a bigger office, hired dozens more people, and then
Mhm.
and then we're a big team all of a sudden, filling up
Right,
space and
right.
customers all over the country and blah blah blah. But the feel was still, for the 4 years or so that I spent with them, it still felt like, oh, this is brand new. It's
Mhm.
kind of had startup energy, and I think it's because we were doing new and different things and growing.
Yeah.
So and even the big health insurance a company we worked together there for a while, or I worked there at one point,
Mhm.
and it felt like a startup in ways because the growth. But there's something that happens though, and I don't know what it is. You've seen both sides of it now: big corporate and startup space, and little companies that still feel like startup. But there is something that happens where it no longer feels that way. It no longer has that like kind of startup vibe. And I think every company that grows kind of dreads that moment, when you stop.
Well, I don't know if it's, yeah, and maybe I don't understand exactly what you're saying, but I know in startup mode, I was, especially early on, I was the architect. I was one of, three developers.
Mm.
I was app engineering because I had to spin up all the servers. I had to do network security. I had to do a little bit of everything. And, when you do so many things, you probably don't do anything really, really well.
Mm.
Well, I mean, you do, but
You take shortcuts because you got 100 plates spinning.
yeah. So I kind of like being in a place now where you can kind of specialize in different things and get really good at it, and then trust that, you know, the infosec people really know what they're doing, and
Yeah,
you don't
true.
have to stay awake at night wondering, who's trying to break into your network.
True.
So
True.
I do kind of like that.
I think you really put your finger on it there. It's when you have to defer that you get the slowed pace, where you're no longer startup, now you're corporate, right?
Mhm.
But you also can rely that you have experts who are really responsible for delivering at a high level of quality.
Exactly.
Yeah, that really is the good and the bad
Yep.
of maturing as an organization, right?
Right.
Now you got to fill out a form or submit a request or whatever to do whatever.
Yeah.
In startup form, you can just hack at it, sling it left and right.
Yeah, you can do anything you want pretty much. And now, yeah, put in a ticket for this and put in a ticket for that. If you need to install something on your laptop, put in another ticket. Yeah.
I guess speed limits don't matter if you're the only one on the road, right?
Exactly.
But when there's 1,000 people out there,
Yeah.
it kind of helps to mind the traffic. So, what are you working on these days? Like, what kind of occupies your days, and like what's your team trying to accomplish?
What's kind of funny is I've kind of followed the same team there for quite a few years,
Hmm.
and we've been doing a lot of work in the VBR, value-based reimbursement space.
Okay.
So,
So, tell us a little bit about that. I'm familiar with the concept, but um, what is it exactly?
okay. So, you were from an insurance company. I'm
I've
sure
been there.
you
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard about FFS or fee for service.
Okay. And what you're talking about is a way that um, insurance companies pay for healthcare services.
Yes, exactly. So, traditionally, um, provider X would get paid Y for CPT code X. Okay. And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Um, Now more and more they're moving to different APM models or alternate payment models.
Okay.
I'm certainly not an expert on that, but there's tons of stuff.
Part of what you're working to improve.
Right. So
So does it drive? So if the industry or the organization is going from the traditional pay for service, right? So I have a nose surgery, and the nose surgery pays X per the formulary or whatever, right?
Right.
And now we want to move, and I presume we want to move to the value based reimbursement because we're measuring outcomes. Okay, did that nose surgery help you breathe better, or do you have less incidence of XYZ, or did we reduce your medication cost, or right? Like,
yeah, I mean that's kind of the idea. I mean, there's so many different models out there.
Okay.
The one that we're spending a lot of time on right now is let's take the flu for example.
Okay.
Um, hypothetically speaking, some analyst would look at the past couple of years, maybe for a provider system, and look at, let's say they had 1,000 members, and during flu season, some percentage of those members ended up in the ER for flu-related issues.
Okay.
And they can look at that and say, yeah, it costs X number of dollars extra because these members ended up in the ER.
I see.
So they could compare that and say, certain percentage of those members were not vaccinated for the flu versus the ones that were. Fewer of those ended up in the ER. So they could kind of model out and say, if these people had their vaccine, fewer of those would have ended up in the ER. So what my team is involved with is actually trying to calculate, how many of these members have had different procedures or immunizations and that sort of thing.
Okay.
The NCQA actually creates hundreds of measures, they're called, that you look at claims and lots of different data and kind of come up with a, a compliance or non-compliance for each member for each of these measures. So we can pull this data in and share it with our providers, and look at the percentages of their attributed members that did get the flu vaccine, and then we can take it one step further and hypothetically say, if you can get your percentage of members from 40% to 60%, we're going to save X amount of money in ER bills, and we can share some of that savings with you. So we're going to incent you to encourage your patients to get the shot.
Yeah, to do those proactive or
Right,
preventative
right.
things. I wonder, where my head went as you were explaining that is two things. One, seems very data sensitive, like the volume and the quality of the
Yep,
data
yep.
seems really critical because there's 10 levers you're trying to pull and they all interact, they're all interdependent, right?
Exactly.
So that must be a tremendous lift, and I suspect your team, struggles with that.
Oh yeah, we got
Concept
we
all the
got
time.
billions of records that we're trying to sort, and
Billions.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and then the other thing I was thinking was when that's successful, because I know there's been some measures of success already, making value based reimbursements encourage better outcomes, right?
Yeah.
But when that's successful, how far could it go? Like, could it get to the point where it impacts people's diets and their habits, and do they exercise and do they work? The Fitbit monitoring and all that kind of stuff.
It's kind of scary almost.
Yeah, the fear and paranoia side of it, I guess, if you let yourself go there. But there's. I was just thinking about I wore a Fitbit for a couple months once
Mhm.
because I think I got incentives for my insurance. Like I got cost reductions or I got a free backpack or whatever. I forget what it was, but
Yeah, it works.
it was like, get off your ass. It's time to move around or whatever. Right? Those aren't bad things, right? Bad nudges or whatever.
But it really, it is a win-win, because it's a win for the members because they don't get sick as often, they don't end up in the ER. It's a win for the insurance companies and the government, whoever's paying the bills, because don't have to pay as much out.
Carrots are cheaper than surgeries,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
figuratively speaking, I'm exaggerating, but yeah, that's the idea, right? Yeah, that seems really rad. So, what's the big, like, what makes the difference between your team being successful and not being successful? Like, what's the bigger threats that you kind of have to contend with on the regular, right? Daily basis, weekly basis, whatever. Is it the quality of the data, the uptime of, I don't know, like
Yes,
what
yes,
concerns
yes. I
you?
mean,
Yeah, all those things.
there are so many factors that are involved. Right now, I actually am starting a war on meetings.
Oh, really? Yeah, we talked about that a little bit over a beer a
Yeah,
couple weeks ago.
yeah, right.
Yeah, so how's that experiment going? Yeah, I think you said you were experimenting with like no meetings on certain days,
Yeah, we're
just
trying
kind of
to
blackout
trying
time.
to have no meeting Tuesday and Thursday right now for the teams. I mean, my life is made up of meetings, but if I can take that bullet for them, so to speak,
Mhm.
they can keep doing what they like to do, and that's not going to meetings. That's
Yeah.
writing software and testing software and building things.
Yeah, and you alluded to it, and I've watched speakers talk about this, the interruption and the restart time, right? Like the ramp up time and the focus,
Yeah,
the impact.
I told you a little bit about that. What did you find when you did some research?
Yeah, just that it takes almost as long. If you go throughout your day and you have 4 meetings, you could spend as much time getting your head back into the context of the problem as you spend actually resolving it, right?
Exactly.
Just remembering where you were.
Mhm.
So like if you like, reading is the analogy. If you're reading a book and you don't put a bookmark in, right? And that's what a meeting is, right?
Yeah.
It's like picking up a book that you've been reading and not having a bookmark, right? And you're like,
Yep.
no, I read that. No, I read that. Or maybe if I go to watch a show and have this TV system. Actually, it's kind of like a pirate content system of some sort or whatever, as the Netflix or the Prime or whatever, right? So what happens is I find myself, I'm like, oh, I started watching the show, and I'm like, oh, where did I watch? And I'm like, fast forward, no, I don't recognize that. Let me rewind, and then I'm trying to find my place. And essentially, that's what you're talking about doing is reducing the amount of time that you spend the fast forward or rewind, reorienting yourself into the context of this problem. And I mean, the work that your team does is thought work. So catching up on your place is the cost.
And it's not just meetings, and it's something that I have to be very cognizant of. But every time I ping someone on Teams or call them or walk past their cube and say, "Hey, what's going on with this?" It's the same thing.
Any
It breaks
interruption.
their conversation. Yeah, it breaks their concentration. So yeah, it's something to be careful about.
Yeah, that would be so. Yeah, you know where my head goes there is the working from home thing and mixing that in to your work life. Do you find that to be an asset, or have you heard that from folks that it's impactful in terms of their? I don't know if it's a. For me, part of what I love about working from home is that I get to take breaks and answer the door and throw the little
Oh, so
laundry
that's
in or
more
whatever. So,
impactful.
so I get interrupted at home.
It's things have been changed completely with COVID and moving from working in the office to working at home. And I know there are a lot of people that um, are have trouble. A lot of leaders, even not just where I work, but just in general, are concerned that they can't walk around and make sure that people are at their desk from 9 to 5 and staring at their computer. And it is a whole different mindset now. Um, I my personal opinion, and I think a lot of people agree with me, is that if you're getting the work done, I don't care if you take an hour or two here and there during the day and work at night and do it. I don't care when you do it, as long as the work gets done and gets done well. I think we're all happy.
True. Yeah, I was thinking about the interruption factor and whether I wonder. Um, yeah, I wonder if folks are more interrupted in the office or more interrupted when they work at home. Somebody's done those studies. You almost have to do the study in the same organization with similar roles, right? Because every organization is different with regard to meetings and chat and all that kind of stuff, instant messaging and stuff. So,
Yeah, I'm sure it's just different interruptions because you may not have me walking around bugging you, but you do have the laundry and you got your dog and whatever the person delivery person ringing your doorbell. So it is just one of those things, and that's probably why some people love to work at night when everybody else is sleeping and there's no distractions.
do you?
No.
I can't. I go to bed when the sun goes down, or my mind does, right? Yeah, I have a hard time.
My mind doesn't always, but I try to.
I'm definitely a morning person. I was up before God this morning. I think that's an exaggeration, but I was up early this morning, and I tend to get more done in the first couple hours than I do all day. But yeah, I guess lack of interruptions is a big impact. It's a difference maker when you're a problem solver. When getting your head around a solution or whatever is the content of the work.
But back to the working hybrid and from home. I do see that there's been quite an impact to the culture that we had. I'm not saying that we can't, and I'm trying to figure out ways to build a new culture with hybrid work. And I don't ask me too many questions about that yet because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But you know a lot about teams. Why are teams better than people working individually?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same reason I'll learn more in this conversation than I would just saying all these things to myself and then reading your response later. There's your thoughts change as you respond to other people and their response to your so it's like you have everybody's heads are wired a little bit different, and the fact that somebody else kind of interrupts and irritates you is the same reason they make you more productive, right? Because they introduce you to ideas or responses or instincts that are different than your own.
Right, right.
it's I think it's the sum is better than the or whatever. The
That's
whole is more than the sum of its parts.
yeah, that's
Right?
what I was heading for because yeah, a team is always supposed to be able to get a lot more done than the individual. You know,
I do believe that it's a weird contradiction. I believe that truth, and I also believe the truth about interruptions being a huge detriment to your productivity.
Yeah.
And teams and teamwork by nature is interruptive, right? We create these dependencies on one another, and then we give ourselves access to one another. And we had that problem in the consulting practice where we had this kind of like no cubes, no offices kind of space. We very much facilitated in an interruptive context there.
Yeah, I think
People love it and hate it.
I think we probably went overboard there, where everybody was sitting shoulder to shoulder, and
Yeah, that's right.
People do need their space.
It's very disruptive. I mean, we almost encouraged it though because we were trying to err on the side of collaboration as opposed to erring on the side of productivity.
Yeah,
But there's a weird contradiction there. It's real. I mean, both of those things are pains, and they kind of like if you completely yield to that one like productivity, then really headphones in, no meetings, no interruptions,
right.
clarify my requirements, and just don't interrupt me for eight
And it might
hours.
depend on what your role is too. I remember this is off subject just a little bit, but it does I think apply. I remember back when I first started working where I am now,
Mm-hmm.
um, when I was came in as a developer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was sitting with a whole bunch of other developers, and I'd hear all this chatter all the time. And there was this one person who we used to support who appeared to be a problem because they would always say, "Oh, not this person again," and
Mm-hmm.
they're always going to criticize everything we do, and they're never going to.
Relationship.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
And I heard this going on for weeks. And at the time, the stories would come up and go up on the board, and different developers would be assigned different stories. Well, a new story for this person came up and was assigned to me, and I was kind of sweating and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when I have to deal with this person? And
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm gonna get ahead of this because all this consternation was happening through email and chat. And I said, I'm just going to go up 2 floors and talk to this person before I start.
That's wise.
So, yeah, I went up and had a conversation and said, okay, this is what you asked for. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what you're going to get. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, yeah, I think so, but this one thing here, you need to do it this way because it's not going to work if you do it that way. And I said, oh, okay, I can do it that way. So went back, did the work, tested it, sent it.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss came to me
Mm-hmm.
a little bit later and said, I just got an email from this person just, saying that he had such a great experience with our team.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nice.
and that this code that we delivered worked so well. And I said, well, thank you, but it's all about communication.
It's because you went out of your way to have an interaction with a little more depth.
Yeah.
Right.
So
You had that face to face.
right.
You saw the feelings, not just the words.
Exactly. And when you talk, I can send you all kinds of nasty emails from my desk if I want to, and I don't feel so bad. But if I'm sitting here looking at you in the face, it's like, huh, you're a person just like me, and we both have feelings, and let's have a conversation like adults, and just work this out.
We have a guideline that I use with the team that I lead, um, which is don't don't deal with negative with problems with negative feelings digitally, right? For a couple of reasons. One, it shouldn't feel safe. You should be in the presence of somebody that you're offending or hurting when you're offending or hurting somebody, so that you can feel it and respect it, right? And then secondly, right, because then you'll respond differently. And so, and then the second thing is just the obvious, like when something is going to hurt, which conflict does, um, we should be more careful, and you get more volume of ideas, concepts, and feelings communicated when you're in person. So, and sometimes you have to concede to a video call or a phone call or whatever, but either or both are better than an instant message or a text or an email, right? So I always try to discourage as much. Somebody will come, a guy that reports to me and say, "Oh, I'm having this problem, and this is what I was thinking about sending him, whatever." I'm like, no, don't. Just call him. Just call him, and then you'll hear, and then he'll say, "Well, wait, that's not true," or something, right? So we never deal with negative things with digital communication. It's just in general a bad hygiene.
I agree. And you'd mentioned the video.
Hmm.
Um, it's really easy not to turn your camera on, especially when nobody else has theirs on.
Hmm.
But more and more, I'm trying to turn mine on because there's a little bit of peer pressure then, and
Yeah,
other people start
for sure.
turning theirs on. But it really, if everybody's working from home, that's the next best thing you can do if you're not going to be in person. Is if you do turn your camera on, at least you can read some body language
That's right.
and
That's right.
yeah,
There's at least you may not have it all, right? Like I can see the posture you're sitting in because we're in the same room, right? That tells me something about your comfort level or whatever else, right? I'm just making stuff up here, but I may not be able to see all of that, but I can still see your facial. So there's additional depth even if you don't get it all, you get more, right? And the same is true for a phone call. You get more than you would in a text because you can hear tone and you can hear volume and distractions and all that fun stuff. Yeah, there's so much that can be done digitally, and you should do as much as you can efficiently. But when it comes to the negative stuff, I've just found that it's problematic if you try to hash it all out black and white. So, can I change the subject?
absolutely.
I don't want to. I don't want to interrupt your problem solving, your thought processes, or whatever.
Now we beat this horse long enough.
Yeah, but you do some cool tech stuff. Thanks for going down that whole path with me because I didn't really have a solid understanding, I guess, of all the stuff that your team does, and maybe I don't completely, but that was a good insight. But you and I have more in common than that too, right? Like we're both kind of do-it-yourselfers and home improvers,
Oh, yes.
and to a lesser extent, I'm also a traveler, but you're kind of a well-traveled person, so I'm kind of curious about that too. And like, what else do you do for fun, right? Like, do you have projects or any side hustles or fun projects or hobbies that you have time for these days?
I have a problem with having way too many interests and way too many hobbies.
Okay,
Um, I know it kind of drives my wife crazy. I think my son's picked up a little bit of that from me,
really?
but yeah, since I do have a background in electronics, I've a couple of years ago, I said, I'm interested in tube electronics.
Okay,
like tubes like they used to use back in the '60s before they had transistors.
okay. I
So,
don't understand it well, so feel
so
go as deep as you want.
I've built a few tube amplifiers that I
Okay,
have in my house. They're very cool, but they use a lot of electricity and create a lot of heat. But they're
I see.
they're still very cool.
Interesting.
So that's one thing that I've been playing with. You'd mentioned travel.
Yeah.
We
Yeah. What's next? Where are you heading to next?
well,
I know you spent time in Japan. I learned that the other day. We were at
that
lunch
was just
together.
for work.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, about I don't know, over 20 years ago, my brother had a consulting job in Italy,
Hmm.
and while he was over there, he invited me to come over and hang out with him for a week or two. So my son is a big Rammstein fan. It's a
Yeah.
German industrial rock
Hmm.
band. We were able to buy tickets for their concert in Padua, Italy next year. So
Mm.
we've booked another trip to go out there and
Make his day, huh?
make his year, hopefully.
Yeah. You're a good pop, man. That's cool.
Right,
We
right.
already kind of had our agenda, but yeah, it was fun to have friends. And we just kind of lived off of Google Translate. Um, it's really awesome, honestly. That experience gave me an appreciation for how fortunate we are to live in this kind of like technological age. A lot of it stresses us out with advertisements following and listening to us, and um, people staring at their phones all day, and
It's
traffic going
different for
crazy.
sure.
There's a lot of negativity, in reference to technology of today. But every time I hear that, I'm like, man, you're spoiled. Like
Oh,
you're failing to appreciate how
absolutely,
much better it
absolutely
makes your life.
spoiled.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I went to Venice, 20 years ago,
yeah,
didn't have a GPS on your phone,
yeah.
had a map. And I don't know if you've seen, you said you haven't been to Venice?
No, I've never been to
Okay.
this.
So it's just, there's no straight anything.
It's a
And
mess.
there's canals everywhere, and everything is twisty, turny, and everything kind of looks the same. And back in the day, you would get lost almost immediately when you're walking, and the only way you could really figure out where you were. Luckily, there's a church on every. There are just hundreds of churches, and you
Okay.
could kind of look up the name of it and then find it on the map, and then you know where
That
you
was your
were.
point of reference.
Yeah.
The church locating instead of geolocating or whatever. There's no satellites. We just have the network of churches.
Yep.
But I'm really glad that advancements are happening.
Oh, yeah,
New
it's
tools are
amazing.
available. And,
It's amazing.
I mean, software in particular, technology in general, is changing the quality of our lives so fast that we forget. It's like it can happen so fast. You can become um, like the quality of your life can become transformed so fast that you forget what it was like before that. And
Yeah.
what comes to mind right now is like what's happening in logistics and shipping and such, right? Packages arrive on my doorstep a day after I order stuff. I don't go to stores and malls, right?
I know.
And that's a huge impact to my quality of life. And I never even had to like think or decide about it. It was
I
just
kind of thank COVID for some of that.
true. There's some truth to that. I think we were on that path beforehand, but
We were, but I
that
think
certainly helped.
yeah, because we used Amazon, but when during the lockdown, it's like, well,
All
now
the more.
everything we need, we can just have it delivered from Amazon or
Yeah, yeah, they're changing the world for sure, and just the logistics and transportation, all that fun stuff, self driving vehicles and autonomous
GPS
stuff.
tracking, yeah, and soon there's going to be drone delivery. And
Yeah, I think that logistics stuff, that transportation delivery logistics stuff, is kind of the next big phase that's about to change our worlds. It already has. It already is. But yeah, even like accessing the internet on the regular, and then social media, and then like all these things that we do.
so much. I remember when I was a kid, I, you know, and I would always drive people crazy as a kid because I would always ask why, because I wanted to know all this stuff. And we had this old Encyclopedia Britannica set, and I wore that thing out looking stuff up. But I can just imagine if I had, you know, the internet when I was, 10 years old,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been
Right. I think we had a hand-me-down version or a Goodwill version or something of encyclopedias that were like old,
right.
so it was mostly accurate. But yeah, those were the thing. I was addicted to
We
those.
didn't spend money for the updates every year.
No, we didn't either. We had our 15-year-old encyclopedias. Or that's as smart as I got to be until Wikipedia came around and changed my world. Right. Yeah, I remember when I started in tech recruiting. I didn't know how to spell IT. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know who was doing what. I think I literally asked a guy, like, "Do you have experience with C pound?" I swear to God, I said that. Anyway, I have no shame. I'll tell you the truth of the truth of the matter. Anyway, I was clueless, right? I had come out of doing like insurance sales and whatever. I forget what else I was doing, but and so I get into the space. I'm completely clueless, and Wikipedia was my best friend. And so I learned quickly, like, don't show up that much of a dumbass. Like, you don't have to spend all day and know how to code, but like figure out what you're even talking about, right? And that was in my first weeks on the job because I just kind of got pushed into just aggressively being. And part of what I love and hate about that industry is that they just kind of push like aggressive and kind of careless behavior. But anyway, so I kind of got into that over my skis a little bit and just was asking dumb questions and that kind of thing. But Wikipedia saved me. I started spending. I'd be spending a couple hours. I'd start there and then wherever it took me, right? But man, I really fell in love. I think I threw them a couple nickels or whatever. I fell in love.
Well, so you as a recruiter, you probably interview a lot of people.
Yeah, that's kind of been my life.
This is kind of a.
This is just an extension of what I've already done.
What do you think about people that come in for an interview and they're interviewing for a position in company X, and you say, "So, what do you know about company X?" And they say, "I don't know." When they could have spent 10 minutes before they walked in on Wikipedia and
True. Yeah, they could have glanced at it at the stoplight before they pulled into your car.
I mean, do you hire someone that?
Yeah, I got mixed feelings on that. You know, I mean, let me ask you. I'll play the devil's advocate. When you interview somebody, do you go look up their social media page?
No, I don't.
Do you not care or not interested or not? Right.
Yeah,
So that's the argument.
I guess I would feel a little creepy doing that. But
Yeah, I see. That makes sense.
now that you mention it,
Yeah, it's like one of those things. Like, okay, do you want them to be like? Do you need them to have a passion for going to work for you?
I do
Do you?
actually. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean that's
So what if they have a
that's
passion
what
for going to work for you and you don't want to hire them? Because what I interpret folks who come without that kind of like pre-work is that they're looking for a good opportunity for themselves. They could be compelled, but they're not sold on you, and why should they be before your door is open?
no, that's a
Right?
good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. Um,
I don't know. I said I had mixed feelings because I halfway believe what I just said, and then I halfway believe what you
I
said
get what you're
too.
saying, but on the other hand, I want someone that is passionate and will be engaged when
Yeah.
I hire them, and will be excited. Not every day that I go to work is a day that I really want to go to work. I mean,
Sure.
most days it's like, yeah, I'm excited to go to work because I love what I do.
Mhm.
But there are some people that work because they have to,
Yeah, true.
and they don't really want to be there.
Yeah, you're never going to bring the best energy or create the best culture with folks who are dragging themselves to what they're doing.
Yep.
So I do agree. That's why I kind of go the other way too. I believe there should be mutual attraction. I believe there should be mutual pursuit between parties who are engaging with one another, whether it's love, whether it's roommates, whether it's work, whether it's a business going in together on a business.
Yep.
There should be you don't want somebody to pursue you more than you pursue them. You would view them as weird, right? So I think there should be equal pursuit. So that's the one half and kind of what I was poking at.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I'm glad we.
Yeah, I get that's my view. But on the other hand, when I'm hiring somebody, I do want to see indications of their preparedness. Like there are certain companies I wouldn't work for, right? Like I would want to know that people had some discerning interest about why or how they would be interested in doing certain kinds of work or working for a certain kind of organization or building a certain kind of product, right? So I think for me, the other side of it, where I do kind of think like you didn't even bother to look, where I kind of feel that same feeling, is like, did you even prepare? Like we're into a thing here, and you didn't like it's publicly available information. Right?
Because when I interviewed for the company that I'm working for,
Yeah.
I read all about it. I knew who the CEO was. I knew how much they made every year. I knew,
You went full annual report the whole bit. Huh?
Yeah. Because why would I waste my time interviewing for a place that I didn't want to work for?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's interesting. There's part of why I kind of stay. Most people, the vast majority of people, I would argue, the vast majority of people work because they have to. In general, they have to go to work.
Well, I have to work too.
Exactly. So when I recognizing that the vast majority of people are going to work because they have to, I also try to honor the fact that not everybody gets to be idealistic about it. And I think in the tech world, we get a little bit spoiled on that expectation because most of the people we work with do have the benefit of picking and choosing what kind of industry or companies they pursue, right? So I think in our world where we're more chasing the talent and trying to be careful about assembling the team and being proactive about finding the right people and bringing, because they're harder to find with just the right skills and attitudes and stuff. I think in that space we have the luxury of expecting that they bring that same level of pursuit, right? Like we're going to go out of our way and chase and hunt and hire recruiters and do all this stuff, and like you're not even bothering to show a little interest. So anyway, so I kind of go back and forth on that. Well, I think our time's up, and I wanted to give you back. I wanted to give you back to your day. But,
I got to get back to work.
Yeah, thanks for taking the little path down, kind of your interests and personal stuff too. And thanks for being my guest, and maybe we'll do it again sometime next year.